I did not build my empire with steel or oil. I built it upon a single girder in my mind, a rule I never broke. You seek the formula for wealth in ledgers, but the truth lies where most fear to look, within the absolute dominion of your own mind. Before you command an empire, you must first command yourself. Ambition is often perceived as a fiery, impetuous force, a burning passion that drives men to great heights or ruin. For me, it has always been a cold instrument. My ambition was, and remains, a calculated, dispassionate engine of progress. It is the architect's blueprint, not the artist's frantic sketch. To build something that endures, you cannot rely on the fleeting heat of emotion. You must lay a foundation on the bedrock of pure, unadulterated reason. For feelings are shifting sands upon which no great enterprise can securely rest. In my youth, I observed the marketplace not as a participant, but as a naturalist studying an ecosystem. I saw men swayed by whispers of fortune and paralyzed by murmurs of disaster. Their decisions, driven by euphoria or panic, were predictable liabilities. I learned early that the crowd's emotional temperature was a contrary indicator. While others rode the waves of sentiment, I anchored myself to the deep, unchanging currents of value and logic. This detachment became my greatest competitive advantage, allowing me to see opportunity where others saw only chaos. The mind must be operated like a secure vault, not a public square. Nothing should enter or exit without deliberate permission. This means guarding the gates against the insidious whispers of irrational optimism and the paralyzing shouts of baseless pessimism. Every piece of information, every potential course of action, must be inspected for its emotional baggage. If an idea arrives cloaked in excitement or fear, it must be stripped bare and examined under the cold light of facts until only its logical skeleton remains. This is not cynicism, it is mental hygiene. The rule, in its most distilled form, is this: every decision, from the allocation of a single cent to the acquisition of a $1 million enterprise, must be completely divested of emotional influence. Fear, greed, euphoria, envy, pride. These are the corrupting agents of sound judgment. They are the ghosts in the machine of commerce. The practice I cultivated was to hold a potential decision in my mind and actively search for any trace of these sentiments. If even a shadow was found, the decision was tabled until the mind was once again a calm, clear vessel for logic. Consider the surgeon. His hand does not tremble with sympathy for the patient, nor does it quicken with the thrill of the procedure. He operates with a focused, detached precision, for he knows that a single emotional tremor could lead to a fatal error. The world of business is no different. It is an operating theater where capital is the lifeblood. To make a cut, to invest, to divest, to expand, these actions require the unblinking steadiness of a master surgeon. A decision made in the heat of passion is like a cut made with a trembling hand. I maintained what one might call a mental ledger, a counterpart to my famous financial account books. In this internal record, I would not only account for dollars and cents, but for the emotions that attempted to influence each transaction. Did a surge of pride tempt me to overpay for a rival's firm? Did a pang of fear urge me to sell during a temporary downturn? By cataloging these mental intrusions, I trained myself to recognize them, to neutralize them, and to ensure that the final entry in my financial ledger was the product of pure calculation. Greed is widely misunderstood. It is not the simple desire for more. That is, ambition, a necessary fuel. Greed is the inability to think with clarity because of that desire. It is a fever of the mind that distorts perception, making a fool's gamble look like a sure investment. It whispers that rules can be bent and that caution is for the timid. The truly disciplined mind recognizes greed not as an ally in the pursuit of wealth, but as the most dangerous of internal saboteurs, a traitor within the gates of your own judgment. I can recall a competitor, a man of considerable talent, whose ambition curdled into pure greed. He expanded too quickly, paid too much, and borrowed too heavily, all in a euphoric chase for market dominance. I watched, I waited, and I calculated. My patience was not passive. It was a strategic weapon. When his over-leveraged empire inevitably collapsed under its own weight, my own organization was able to acquire his most valuable assets for a mere fraction of their true worth. His greed created my opportunity. Every day I engaged in a quiet internal ritual I called suffocating the flame. I would identify any flicker of avarice or impatience within myself and systematically starve it of the oxygen of attention. I viewed unchecked greed as a contagion, a mental sickness that, if allowed to fester, would infect my entire enterprise and lead to its eventual decay. A healthy financial body requires a cool, regulated internal temperature. Greed is the fever that signals a system in distress, a precursor to collapse. It is crucial to understand the chasm that separates ambition from greed. Ambition is a long-term vision, a meticulous architectural plan for building an edifice that will last for generations. It is patient, strategic, and rooted in reality. Greed, however, is a short-term impulse, a desperate grasp for immediate satisfaction that demolishes the foundation for future growth. Ambition builds empires. Greed digs their graves. One is the work of a master craftsman, the other of a reckless vandal. The vast expansion of the Standard Oil Company was never a series of euphoric conquests for me. Each acquisition, each new pipeline, each efficiency gained was simply the next logical step in a grand mathematical equation. The goal was a perfectly integrated, maximally efficient system. The joy of victory, the thrill of besting a rival, these were luxuries I could not afford. Such emotions cloud the vision needed to see the next 10 moves on the board. The work itself was the reward. I would propose an exercise for you. Take a moment to reflect on a recent financial decision you made, however small. Now analyze it with brutal honesty. Was it driven by a clear-sighted assessment of value and risk, or was it subtly tainted by the fear of missing out, by the desire for a quick profit, by the infectious excitement you saw in others? Deconstruct your own motivations. This practice, repeated daily, is the first step toward building the mental fortress required for true and lasting success. The financial markets are, in essence, a vast ocean of human hysteria. Tides of optimism and pessimism pulled the unprepared in every direction. My governing rule was to be the granite rock against which these emotional waves would break and dissipate. When the storm of panic raged and others frantically sold their holdings, I would consult my charts, my ledgers, and my principles. I did not listen to the howling winds of the mob. I listened to the quiet, unwavering voice of reason and fundamental value. I witnessed the panic of 1857 and the great crash of 1873 not as catastrophes, but as educational events. While others saw ruin, I saw the predictable outcome of widespread speculative fever. I saw assets of immense intrinsic worth being discarded for pennies on the dollar by men consumed with terror. My analysis was never based on the day's headlines, but on the immutable laws of supply, demand, and operational efficiency. Thus, their moments of greatest fear became my moments of greatest opportunity. One does not prepare for a crisis by attempting to predict its exact arrival. That is a fool's errand. One prepares for a crisis by forging a mind that is incapable of panic. The strength required to act decisively when everyone else is frozen in fear is not built in the moment. It is cultivated over years of disciplined practice. It is the daily exercise of choosing logic over alarm, of training the mind to remain placid and analytical, no matter the turbulence of the external world. In moments of profound decision, I found that silence and solitude were my most trusted counselors. To isolate oneself from the incessant noise of the crowd, from the opinions of agitated associates, from the breathless reports of the day, is essential. The clarity required to navigate a panic cannot be found in a room full of shouting men. It is found in the quiet sanctuary of a mind that has been deliberately insulated from the contagion of collective fear. The best decisions are born in tranquility. My nightly routine was a non-negotiable ritual of mental consolidation. I would review the day's events, the fluctuations of the market, the progress of my operations. But I would do so as a historian reviews a completed chapter. I analyzed the facts, noted the outcomes, and planned the next day's actions based on that data alone. I forbade any intrusion of anxiety about what the morrow might bring. The future would be met with the same dispassionate logic as the present. Let it be understood that this cultivated calm is not passivity. It is the very opposite. It is the state of perfect readiness. A panicked mind is a useless tool. It is reactive, clumsy, and prone to catastrophic error. A calm mind, however, is a finely honed weapon. It is observant, agile, and capable of executing bold and decisive action with surgical precision. The calm I speak of is not the absence of activity, but the prerequisite for effective, intelligent, and profitable activity. The ego has an insatiable hunger to be proven right. Reason, in contrast, has a quiet desire to be profitable. These two objectives are rarely aligned. The ego will cling to a failing investment out of pride, refusing to admit a mistake. Reason will cut the loss without a moment's hesitation and redeploy the capital to a more productive venture. The greatest liability on any man's balance sheet is an unchecked ego, for its debts are always paid in the currency of squandered opportunity. I recall an early venture where my analysis pointed to one course of action, but my pride, my desire to outwit a particular rival, pushed me toward another. I allowed ego to sit at the head of the table, and the result was a significant, though not ruinous, financial loss. The money was gone, but the lesson it purchased was priceless. I learned that day that the cost of indulging my own vanity was far too high a price to pay. The sting of that failure inoculated me against the disease of pride for the rest of my days. The mental rule, when applied to the ego, demands a radical form of humility. It requires the strength to admit error swiftly and impersonally. It requires the discipline to abandon a cherished idea or strategy the moment data proves it flawed, without any sense of personal defeat. The goal is not to be the man who is always right, but to be the man whose enterprise consistently succeeds. This often means having the courage to be publicly wrong in the short term, to be profoundly right in the long term. To insulate my decisions from the corrupting influence of my own ego, I surrounded myself with men of profound intelligence and gave them one primary directive: challenge my conclusions. I did not want a council of sycophants who would affirm my own biases. I wanted a team of trusted adversaries who would stress-test every assumption and probe every plan for weakness. A decision that could withstand the rigorous scrutiny of such men was a decision forged in the fires of objective reason, not in the faint warmth of self-satisfaction. You must learn to distinguish between confidence and arrogance. Confidence is a byproduct of meticulous preparation and a sober assessment of facts. It is a powerful asset. Arrogance is the loud, blustering expression of an insecure ego. It is a catastrophic liability. Confidence is rooted in data. Arrogance is rooted in delusion. The former empowers you to act decisively, while the latter blinds you to the very risks that will bring about your downfall. The most vital habit I cultivated was to become my own most ferocious critic. Before any plan was presented to my associates, it first had to survive an onslaught of skepticism from me. I would actively seek out the flaws. I would argue from the perspective of my most cunning competitor. I would imagine the worst-case scenarios. By subjecting my own ideas to this internal trial by fire, I ensured that only the most resilient and logically sound strategies ever saw the light of day. The modern world has developed a cult of speed, an obsession with immediate results and instant gratification. I, however, built my fortune upon the worship of a different deity: patience. Speed makes mistakes. Speed overlooks details. Speed pays a premium for things that time would deliver at a discount. Patience, on the other hand, is the quiet, unassuming partner of compound interest. Patience allows a small advantage to grow into an unassailable dominance. It is the most powerful force in the universe of finance. Consider the mighty oak. No one plants an acorn and expects to see a towering tree the following morning. It requires decades of slow, silent, and often imperceptible growth. It must endure storms, droughts, and the changing of countless seasons. So it is with a great investment or a great enterprise. One must plant the seed in fertile ground, tend to it diligently, and then grant it the one essential nutrient that cannot be bought: time. The desire for an immediate harvest is the surest way to guarantee you will never see one. The mental rule of patience manifests most powerfully in the capacity for deliberate inaction. In a world that screams for constant activity, the ability to sit still, to observe, and to do nothing is a rare and invaluable skill. Many of my greatest financial successes came not from a brilliant action, but from the disciplined refusal to act during times of market frenzy. While others were frantically buying or selling, I was simply waiting for the precise, calculated moment to intervene. The strategy of vertical integration that became the hallmark of the Standard Oil Company was not a rapid conquest. It was a slow, methodical, and painstaking process that unfolded over many years. We did not rush. We ensured that each component of the system, from the wellhead to the refinery to the final delivery wagon, was acquired, or built for maximum efficiency before moving to the next. This patient construction created a fortress of profitability that our more impetuous rivals could never hope to breach. True patience is not a passive, sleepy state of waiting. It is an active, vigilant observation. It is the mindset of the master general who positions his troops and studies the battlefield, refusing to commit to the main assault until the exact moment of maximum advantage reveals itself. It requires more discipline, more control, and more nerve than a reckless charge. It is the quiet confidence of knowing that time is your greatest and most loyal ally in any campaign. To cultivate this virtue, you must shift your focus. Stop obsessing over the immediate result and fall in love with the process. Find satisfaction in the daily execution of a sound strategy, in the meticulous analysis, in the patient accumulation of resources. When your reward comes from the quality of your daily work rather than the fleeting validation of a stock ticker, you liberate yourself from the tyranny of short-term thinking and position yourself for enduring success. In the theater of business, opinions are as common and as worthless as confetti after a parade. They are fleeting, emotional, and utterly unreliable. Facts and numbers, however, are sacred. They are the bedrock of reality upon which all sound decisions must be built. My mind was trained from a very young age to revere only one authority: the unyielding, unemotional truth of the ledger. An opinion cannot be debated, it can only be ignored. A number, however, demands respect. My famous ledger, A, which I kept meticulously from my very first earnings as a boy, was more than just a record of accounts. It was my primary tool for mental training. It taught me that every single cent was a soldier in my financial army, and each one must be deployed with purpose and held accountable for its performance. This habit of precise accounting for the small things instilled a mindset of ruthless objectivity that I later applied to transactions involving millions. If a proposed course of action cannot be defended with clear, hard numbers, it is not a business plan, it is a daydream. Feelings, intuitions, and vague hopes have no place in a financial projection. I made it a strict rule that any proposal brought before me had to be stripped of all narrative and presented as a cold, logical equation. What is the precise cost? What is the quantifiable risk? What is the projected return? And what data supports that projection? All else is noise. This unwavering focus on data allowed my organization to make moves that seemed counterintuitive or even foolish to our competitors, while they were reacting to popular narratives or chasing the latest industry trend. We were quietly analyzing freight costs, refining yields and inventory levels. We were looking at the internal mechanics of the machine of commerce, not the colorful paint on its exterior. This gave us the ability to see the true reality of a situation long before others did. People have a tendency to fall in love with stories, the story of a revolutionary new technology, the story of a charismatic founder, the story of a company destined for greatness. I disciplined myself to resist the siren song of narrative. I did not read the company's story. I read its balance sheet. A balance sheet cannot lie. It cannot charm. It is a stark, unvarnished portrait of a company's health, and it was the only portrait in which I was ever truly interested. I challenge you to apply this rigor to your own ambitions. Take your most cherished financial goal and deconstruct it. Remove all the romanticism and fantasy. What are the raw numbers required to achieve it? What is the exact savings rate? What is the necessary rate of return? What are the specific, measurable actions that must be taken each day, each week, each month? Transform your dream into an equation. Only then can it begin to be solved. The majority of men become emotionally shackled to the outcome of their ventures. They are elated by victory and crushed by defeat. This is a profound and crippling error. My focus was never on the outcome, which is often subject to forces beyond one's control, but on the quality and integrity of the decision-making process. I knew that if the process was impeccably logical, the long-term results would inevitably be favorable. A single loss means nothing in a lifetime of sound judgments. Once a decision was made, based on the most thorough and dispassionate analysis available, I practiced the art of mental detachment. I had done my part. I had brought all my intellectual resources to bear on the problem. To then spend time worrying about the outcome was a complete waste of energy. Anxiety does not alter the future. It only poisons the present and clouds the mind for the next decision. The capital was deployed. The next task was already at hand. This discipline is perhaps the pinnacle of mental control, and it is a source of profound peace. It is akin to being a master farmer. You select the best soil, you plant the finest seed, you water it and protect it with perfect diligence. You cannot, however, control the sun or the rain. You do everything that is within your power, and you accept that the final harvest rests with forces larger than yourself. You focus on impeccable execution, and you release your attachment to the result. I can recall a significant investment in a new refining technology that, despite a flawless analytical process, ultimately failed due to an unforeseen scientific breakthrough by a competitor. My associates were despondent. I, however, felt no emotional sting. The decision to invest had been correct based on all available information. The outcome was unfortunate, but not a reason for self-flagellation. This emotional clarity allowed us to liquidate the failed project swiftly and redeploy the capital without delay. The source of true mental tranquility is not in achieving constant success, but in knowing, with absolute certainty, that you have done everything humanly and rationally possible in your pursuit of it. Win or lose, you can rest with a clear conscience, knowing your actions were the product of reason, not impulse. This internal validation is far more valuable than any external applause, for it is the foundation upon which you can build again, and again, and again. It is absolutely critical to distinguish between a bad outcome and a bad decision. A bad decision is one made with poor logic, incomplete information, or emotional bias. A bad outcome is simply an undesirable result that can sometimes follow from a perfectly sound decision. The world is an uncertain place. Do not judge yourself by the whims of fortune. Judge yourself by the quality of your mind. Good decisions, repeated consistently, will always prevail over the long arc of time. Mental discipline is not an innate gift bestowed upon a chosen few at birth. It is a muscle. Like any muscle in the body, it atrophies from disuse and grows stronger with consistent, daily exercise. You cannot simply decide to be disciplined in a moment of crisis. You must build that strength, day by day, in the small, mundane choices of your life, so that it is there, powerful and ready, when the great challenges arrive. My morning rituals were not about optimizing productivity in the modern sense. They were about setting the tone of mental command for the entire day. From the moment I rose, every action was deliberate. This was not a matter of rigid, joyless routine, but of establishing from the outset that my will, not my fleeting impulses, was in control. The day would proceed according to my design, not according to the chaotic whims of emotion or distraction. This rule of mental control was applied relentlessly to the smallest of habits. Punctuality was not a matter of politeness, it was an exercise in personal integrity and discipline. Frugality was not about hoarding money. It was a daily reaffirmation that resources were to be respected and deployed strategically. Precision in my speech was not about being eloquent. It was about training the mind to think with clarity and to eliminate the wasteful ambiguity of careless words. The simple act of saying no is one of an individual's most powerful forms of mental training. To say no to a small, immediate pleasure in favor of a larger, future goal. To say no to a tempting but unnecessary expenditure. To say no to a distraction that pulls you away from your primary purpose. Each no is a repetition that strengthens the muscle of your willpower, preparing it to lift the heavier weights of life's great decisions. Think of yourself as an athlete training for the Olympics of life. A champion does not train only when he feels inspired. He trains every single day, in the rain and in the sun, when he is tired and when he is energized. His commitment is to the process, not to his mood. You must adopt this same mentality toward your mind. The daily practice of rational thought, emotional control, and disciplined action is your training regimen. I will offer you a practical place to begin. Institute what I call an information diet. Consciously limit your exposure to the sensational, emotionally charged news and opinions that are designed to provoke a reaction. The constant barrage of outrage and excitement is poison to a rational mind. Replace that noise with the study of facts, of history, of the mechanics of your industry. Feed your mind a diet of substance, and you will starve the parasites of emotional reactivity. You have now heard the principle that served as the unwavering governor of my life and fortune. This is not a tactic to be employed when convenient. It is a philosophy to be lived. The question is not whether this rule works, for my legacy stands as the irrefutable evidence of its power. The question, the only one that truly matters, is whether you possess the strength of character and the force of will to apply it. The great work begins now. Choose one decision you must make today, however small, and submit it to the cold, impartial tribunal of reason. If this brief glimpse into the mind that helped build a nation has resonated with you, subscribe and continue this journey. For the mastery of the world outside you begins, always and without exception, by first mastering the world within.